Hi, welcome back to my channel, which I think I'm going to call Rogue Cat Rom-Coms because my cats love to be in these and I'm not going to stop them, and I think it's kind of fun to manage the chaos. They have some controversial opinions. They think that the movies should have more fish, you know, that kind of thing. So, in this third episode, we're going to be talking about You've Got Mail, which I'm pretty excited about I'm very excited about because it's definitely one of my favorites. To kind of preface everything, basically, this is not so much a review in the sense of like, is it good, is it bad, because I think it's great. I love it, and I have so much to say about why I love it, but that's not to say there aren't things that I think are worth talking about that I think are a little bit problematic, because I have strong feelings about what works and I have strong feelings about what don't work, or what I feel like could have been done differently. And there's some things that like the aging process will have affected, but that's just the nature of it. So before I get too into my opinions, I just kind of want to cover some biographical information about this film. It's called You've Got Mail. I'm sure most, if not all of you, have heard of it. It stars Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. It also stars Greg Kinnear and Parker Posey, who are both fantastic. The cast of the movie is fantastic. Like I've said, I feel like the 90s was the golden age, and that cast reinforces my opinion. Dave Chappelle has a supporting role, which is kind of funny to see now. It's also written by Nora Ephron. She's also kind of a classic rom-com writer. It's just like overall like a well-done movie, in my opinion. But also, Rotten Tomatoes, it got 68%. So I was kind of heartened to see that because I do think it's, for what it is, which is a romantic comedy, let's not pretend, it's great. And I want to talk about some of the reasons why I think it's great. And also some of the reasons why I think it has some flaws and it has aged a little bit. So You've Got Mail has a technological component to it, right? Because it's about how the characters are talking to each other online. So in those details, it's incredibly dated because that kind of thing changes so quickly. So of course it's dated. Like, it's in 20 years of technology since that movie. So yes, it's funny that there's dial-up, and it's funny that it's AOL, and it's funny that the idea of like online dating is still kind of like, whoa, like sketchy or kind of mysterious, and the idea that you're talking to someone online but you don't know who they are in real life is like a big deal. It's interesting to kind of go back in time that way, but I don't want to keep harping on that because like, it is what it is. It's a 20-year-old movie. I do think that if you're a younger person and you weren't alive at that time or were quite young, so like if you were born in the 90s, say, and you just like don't really remember that time, then you might enjoy watching it just to kind of get that like in the moment perspective on what the technology was like. It was fairly cutting edge, because at the time it's supposed to really like kind of be touching on like the zeitgeist of the moment, tapping into the kind of beginning of the internet in everyone's homes and the potential implications of that. I think it's an interesting kind of cultural artifact for the late 90s in terms of technology, but I don't want to harp on how it's so funny that it was AOL and it was dial-up and blah blah blah. Somebody says cyber sex, and it's funny, but it's not really the point. In most ways, the movie's fairly timeless. You just kind of have to roll with those references just because things have changed in that arena. We won't dwell on that for any longer than I just did, which was at least a couple minutes. So if you somehow missed this movie, or maybe you're too young for it, I will give a brief summary of the kind of premise of the movie. So Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, when you start the movie, you find out that they are living these comfortable lives in New York City. New York City, guys. I think this is now my third film that is set, at least partially in New York City, which I did not do on purpose. It just sort of happened. I knew that was a trope, like a rom-com trope, but it's just like, really? Like, there are still dozens of significant cities in the States. It's a huge country. And the fact that just by nature of how I kind of picked it, like I really didn't plan it, it just sort of ended up that way because I think like the numbers are just in my favor in terms of ending up with a bunch of New York City rom-coms. So I'm thinking that the fourth one, I'm really going to try to avoid that just because, I don't know, it's just weird. And like, this can happen elsewhere. There are other settings that can work for a rom-com. If anybody's watching this, you can let me know what you would want. But I think I need to take a break from New York City just because it's becoming a little bit silly. So anyway, they're in New York City. You see them kind of start their day. They both have significant others kind of go off to work, and they sign on to AOL, and they have mail. So the premise is basically that they are in an anonymous sort of message writing relationship of some kind with somebody online. That feels, as I explained it, it feels a little bit abrupt, and I think that that's sort of how the movie goes, like, which is kind of nice because like you get into the movie and already something is happening, right? There's something going on. They're keeping something from their significant others and kind of being sneaky, but like cute rom-com sneaky, not like creepy motel, like clearing your phone creepy. I don't know. I don't actually think that sneaky is good. Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan are just so freaking cute that it's cute in this context. So you kind of get put in the middle of it and you hear their kind of back and forth, and they both walk to work, and it's like New York in the fall. It's beautiful. It's such a nice scene. It just feels like so rom-com-y, like going about their lives, like walking with like a great like 90s soundtrack. I think it's Cranberries in the background. Enjoy it. It just makes me kind of like excited for the rest of the movie because I'm just like, these people, they have their lives, they're going about things, and they both live in the same part of the city, so they're crossing paths, but not really. So it's kind of like they're just missing each other, which is fun. That's sort of the premise, but then the larger premise becomes that Meg Ryan's character, Kathleen, owns a small bookstore, and she quickly finds out that Tom Hanks, Joe Fox, is opening a Fox Books is what it's called, like around the corner from the shop around the corner. And them kind of like the character and her employees kind of realizing that this might affect their business. I don't feel like I'm doing a very good job of describing the premise of this movie. You already know that they're talking to each other online, but it's anonymous, so they don't know. And then it is revealed to you that they are competitors. They're business competitors. So like, ooh, what's gonna happen? You know? I think it's a bit tricky for me to summarize this movie clearly or logically because I've seen it so many times that I forget like what it would be like to watch it as if and to not know what's coming. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the premise. It's fun. It's improbable. It's very improbable that they would meet online because it's like global. I don't, maybe they met in a New York chat, like they're supposed to have met in a chat room. Maybe they met in a New York chat room. Again, that seems improbable. And they live in the same neighborhood and then they're competitors. It's a lot of coincidences. And you'll see that the coincidences kind of continue. But if you kind of just like let that go, you know, it's really fun. It was 20 years ago. You know, maybe one of the themes of my channel, right? It was a different time. Maybe there was only like 1,000 people in New York and they were constantly crossing paths. I know that's not true, but just let it happen. Because to me, You've Got Mail is sort of undeniably a good film. And like, as I've said before, by all means, argue with me in the comments. Tell me why you don't feel like that's the case. I am totally open to it. If you have good reason that you don't think it's good rom-com, I'm happy to hear it. But to me, it is undeniably a good one. So rather than kind of go through like what makes it like good or bad, I think I want to talk a little bit about all of the rom-com tropes that kind of happen in this film, to kind of go through some of them that hopefully we'll refer back to again, I think is kind of what I was imagining. Let's kind of go through some of them. So the first one that I already sort of pointed out was New York City, right? I think Nora Ephron was really into New York City because When Harry Met Sally is also set there. So New York City. I think New York City and other big cities is a common trope. It just gives you a lot to talk about. And there's, guys, I don't know why they're so often in big cities. Yeah, maybe just creates like more opportunity for like interesting dynamics and interesting jobs. Maybe it makes the whole movie a little bit more aspirational. Like, you see this woman like doing her thing in a big city, and that's part of the fantasy. I feel like that might be part of the fantasy. It's sort of more romantic, and I mean that like capital R romantic. Like just sort of fantastical, right? It feeds into a fantasy about a life that would be great to live. The cats. So we have New York City. We have the media jobs, right? So they both sell books. Meg Ryan, so Kathleen Kelly, first she sells books, and then once she, at another point, she talks about writing a book. She's literary, right? Kathleen Kelly's significant other is a writer, absurdly literary, like annoyingly so, like on purpose. He's insufferable, pretty much. He's kind of a hipster. He's really into his like old-fashioned typewriters. He is like a Luddite, basically. He like curses the advancement of technology and thinks that like they're just gonna like ruin the world, which kind of makes the movie more timeless, because that's certainly something that we continue to talk about today. Like, so he feels kind of timeless in a way, even though he's very much talking about the technology of the time, which is interesting. And then Joe Fox's spouse, the significant other, is a book editor. So they're all literary. They all run in the literary circles, which I think is kind of funny. My cats are fighting. It's almost dinner time, kind of, and they get a little frisky or something. Not frisky. I take that's frisky. That's weird. Restless, I guess. This is why we're the road cat rom-coms. So very much that trope of the literary jobs, Definitely fantasy in that sense, right? People are rich, they're very well educated, they're very well spoken, all that kind of, all those tropes of the romantic comedies. I want to now talk about what about this movie I love, and what I love in this movie that I feel like I love in a lot of movies. It's kind of like, what do I want? I'm gonna try to get to the heart of it and then maybe back into what the like building blocks are, if that makes sense. Because I really want to like communicate properly and not just be like, it's a good movie. I like because it's a good movie. Because like, it's boring. I don't want to be boring. I don't want this to be a boring video. I can do better, So basically, what I like about this movie and what usually causes me to like a rom-com or various other types of media is that I feel the love story. I feel the connection between the two characters. I feel the sparks. I feel the desire. And I feel the pain, and I want them to be together because I feel why they should be. I feel that they do have a connection and that I want them to be together. That's what I really want. And I know that might sound obvious, but I don't believe that all people feel that kind of focused on that element. I think that a lot of people approach romantic comedies like just like another type of movie to watch that like can be like funny and sweet and like have like interesting characters and like beautiful sets and amazing music, and it's just like a whole experience that like is fun and interesting, and they're just kind of like, cool, that was good. Kind of how I feel about like action adventure movies. I wouldn't be able to articulate like exactly what in an action movie I really want, because there's like nothing, because I don't love them especially, but I can articulate like what it is exactly that I want in a rom-com, And that's what I want. And I feel like You've Got Mail really like delivers on that. And there's a couple reasons why I think that's the case. For me, at least. The first thing and the biggest thing, and I've noticed this as a trend throughout my kind of tastes, it's the interaction between the main characters and the amount of interaction. You've Got Mail has a lot of interaction between the two main characters. They are writing to each other online, and that's happening more or less throughout, but they're also interacting in real life. They are interacting throughout the movie. There's that constant connection, and I feel like for me, for the most part, there are probably exceptions, but for the most part, for me to love a romantic comedy, I need that interaction throughout. You need to build a rapport, to see them together, to feel that thing, you know, I was kind of talking about in the last one. And so I feel like the more you see the interaction between them, the better. And some movies, and again, it might seem like initially you're like, well, that's like the whole point of a rom-com. But the thing is, it's not. Lots of romantic comedies have relatively little interaction between the main characters. It can be due to the fact that there are so many other storylines happening, whether it's like they're trying to get a job, or they're dealing with their family, or there's some other kind of mishap, there are mishaps happening, or there are schemes or whatever, that there are so many different threads in the movie that there just isn't time, that you kind of have to plant key scenes to kind of push the love story along, but it's relatively little time. I find those tend to like be less effective for me. I just don't enjoy them. I don't really, or like, I'll enjoy them, but they're not my favorite. I'll be like, well, I don't really care about this couple. Like, that's my main complaint with rom-coms, is I don't care about this couple. I don't know what it is that makes them better suited to each other than to anybody else. The physical attraction is not enough for me. If they have a few, you know, cute moments, it's usually not enough. So I want a lot of that, and You've Got Mail delivers that. So another thing that I like, it's very verbal or wordy. I don't know. I'm a wordy person. I'm a verbal person. I can talk to myself for hours in my apartment with my cats. And so I like wordy. I like the fact that they are like writing to each other, so you're getting this voiceover of the things that they write to each other. And they're wordy. Like, these are wordy people, right? They're verbal people. And so in a completely sort of personal way, I can kind of relate, and I enjoy that style. And then when they do like see each other in the world, there's lots of banter. I love banter as like a courting sort of mechanism. I don't know. I just love banter. They have lots of banter. Even like when they hate each other. At one point they hate each other. There's still lots of banter, like mean banter, and I love that too. So that helps a lot, because that's just like what I'm into. Which kind of brings me to the next thing that I like, which is love stories that begin with hostility. Let's just call it what it is. I am acutely aware that this is not a healthy thing, and that most relationships, it's unrealistic to expect a successful relationship to come out of a hostile beginning. I know this, and that's why I would not go about things that way in my real life. But in a love story, oh, I love it. And if you're thinking right now, like, oh, maybe you liked X storyline in X movie or X book or X TV show, you're probably right. I like the snarkiness. I like that kind of like frustration and that sort of like wanting to like get the person's attention and like piss them off. Because I feel like that's like an element of attraction or just an element of like interest. Like this person has piqued your interest, you know? They are like taking up time in your thoughts. And I enjoy that. Oh, Anne of Green Gables. Oh yeah. I was a big fan of the whole Anne Gilbert thing. I mean, it was pretty one-sided because like Anne just like was like, I hate you, Gilbert, and Gilbert was like, but I love you. So that was like one of the original ones that I was into the Hostility. But yeah, I enjoy that. I'm not saying that they all have to be that, and that's less of a deal breaker and more of just like, ooh, this will be fun. Like the having a certain amount of interaction between the characters is a bit of a deal breaker for me. I don't think there's a lot of movies that are effective without. So that's kind of a deal breaker, but the hostility or the sort of antagonism is not a deal breaker. But I love it. So like they're like talking online, right? They don't know who each other are, and then he comes to her bookstore before his bookstore has opened, and so they like have a bit of a spark, like nothing huge, but like talks to her, and like she's obviously adorable. I mean, she is so frackin' adorable in this movie. Like you kind of feel like her, like birds must do her hair in the morning, but like it's okay. I don't know. Like she's just like, he comes in and she's like reading a book to the kids. Oh my god, it's so cute. She's adorable. And then she's like all like chipper and smiley, and he's obviously like into her, and like neither of them know who the other person is, right? So they have like a little moment. It's kind of flirty, and then she finds out who he is, and they're all at a dinner party, and she like basically like gets kind of up in his face about how like he's Joe Fox, he kept it from her, they fight, and it's so good because like they're like layers, because it's like she's frustrated because she found him attractive and now realizes that he liked the enemy, and he's frustrated because she dislikes him so much and he didn't want her to, right? He didn't want her to know who he was. He wanted her to like him, and now she doesn't, right? But instead of like his like disappointment about that or frustration about that comes out and just like being kind of a dick. Like he's really not nice at all. And I love it. And it's interesting because this time that I watched it, which is like, it's hard, I can't say like what watch that is. I've watched it a lot of times, but like it had been a few years. So watching it again, I realized like there's some references to Pride and Prejudice, which is one of my favorite books. Yes, I know. So obvious. God, could you be any more basic? Yeah, I know. I can't help it. So much hostility. So good. Anyway. So there's a few references to Pride and Prejudice in You've Got Mail. Kathleen Kelly writes to her anonymous pen pal, i.e. Joe Fox, about rereading Pride and Prejudice and how she's always so swept up in the story, and you see him trying to read the book after she talks about it, which is really sweet. And when they decide to meet, she uses the book. But basically, Pride and Prejudice comes up a couple of times. And I kind of just thought that was just like, oh yeah, of course she'd be into Pride and Prejudice, whatever. But I kind of feel like you're meant to draw some parallels between this story and Pride and Prejudice. The idea that like somebody can be right for you but can come off absolutely the wrong way. Like Joe gets increasingly frustrated through the movie because Kathleen hates him because he's kind of a dick, but not understanding that part of that is like a defense mechanism, and it's him like not knowing how to go about the situation, just being kind of not like kind of doubling down on being like hostile out of not really being able to deal with his emotions about her, which is such a cop-out, I know. I just want to take a second to say, boys and girls, sometimes boys are not dicks because they secretly love you. Sometimes they're just dicks, and I don't want to imply that anytime a boy is not nice to you, if a guy is not nice to you, there's a good chance he's just not nice. But it's fun in our fantasy romantic land to think that sometimes they come across a certain way, but they're not necessarily like that. They're just struggling. And so it's kind of that same dynamic of like Mr. Darcy. I'm not gonna like try to catch you up on Pride and Prejudice. I'm sorry if you don't know it. You skip this part, or you can listen and then maybe be inspired to read it or watch it. Can I recommend it? No. I mean, the BBC one's good. The Keira Knightley one is also good. Totally getting off track. So he's kind of like the Mr. Darcy character who's like really into Elizabeth Bennet / Kathleen Kelly, but doesn't know what to do about the fact that they kind of hate them, right? Like that the female characters hate the male characters and think that they're bad people. So there's definitely some parallels there, which totally makes sense because I love Pride and Prejudice. Of course, I would love anything that has some parallels in Pride and Prejudice. So, and there's like some things that Elizabeth Bennet has to kind of forgive Darcy for. So it's there a little bit. So that's interesting. How did I get here? So, okay, yeah. So going back to that sort of antagonistic or hostile kind of romance or beginning. It's so satisfying because, so basically this movie is quite romantic. And I know obviously it's a movie, but there's like a couple of moments that are just like, because basically he is just like, bah, Kathleen Kelly's the worst, but is like, I'm gonna meet this woman online who seems so great. And then he goes to meet her, but he brings his friend Dave Chappelle, who looks in the window for him. And this is probably my favorite Tom Hanks scene of the movie because he's great. He's so funny and like all like nervous and but like excited and like obviously so like into this girl and just like really just like is so like ready and like it's just like if she's as pretty as a lamppost, I'm crazy not to marry her, which I don't know what that means. Is it just me or like lamppost kind of skinny? Anyway, just very sweet, very excited, but he's also very nervous. And then Dave Chappelle basically tells him that it's Kathleen Kelly and he's like, what the F? And it's just like really disappointed and it's kind of like there's no point and goes to leave and then there's more sort of banter because he comes into the cafe a little bit later, pretends like it's just a coincidence. They do the hostile banter, but then she's this like amazing moment where you're like, she's so lovable. Like they're both so lovable and I love that. Like I want to feel like I get what the other person is seeing in this person. Like he's being a dick and like she holds her own, which is like something that she learns throughout the movie and that's sort of good, but then she also feels bad because she's like being mean and she's not usually mean. So, you know, he's kind of teasing her because he figures out, or he pretends to figure out that she's being something. He obviously knows that that's what she's doing, but he pretends to sort of figure it out and they banter for a bit. Oh, and there's this really sad moment. See, it's so good. There's like layers because like at one point she says like, the man I mean tonight is nothing like you. He is like the, you know, like the sweetest, nicest, best man ever known. And if he's not here, he must have a reason. And you can see how like Tom Hanks, Joe, is like so like upset by this because he's like, it's like that she's talking about him, but in her mind they're totally different, right? Like she has these two versions of him and he can't live up to the one that she has because the other one is so bad and it's so sad for him because he's just like, he realizes that he doesn't, at this point it is not feasible to like go forward into the real world with this person online because she hates you, right? Like it sucks for him, it does, but it's also sad because it's like she has such a good opinion of him. It's like she knows that side of him and seems to understand and really appreciate him. So it's like doubly sad because like she likes him but also hates him. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but it's just like there's a lot of I want to mention there's a lot of dramatic irony in this movie, which I really enjoy. Dramatic irony is it's called dramatic because it's based on like drama, so like plays or musicals or whatever, where the audience, or in this case the viewers, know something that the characters don't and can kind of get something out of that, not like can draw something from the scene with our knowledge that is not available to the characters. It's often used for like humor, like it's not funny to the characters what's happening because they don't know the full story the way that we do, but it's funny to us because of what we know. And so this movie, there's a lot of that because we know that Kathleen Kelly is actually talking about this guy when she says that he's totally different, right? Like, this guy is so nice. And like, we know that that's the opposite, right? And it sort of adds this, like, some weird interest to some of the emotional dynamics. And I really enjoy the dramatic irony throughout the movie. Like, at the beginning, when neither of them know who each other is, then we can we appreciate the scenes where they're like sparring because like we know. So that's fun. So anyway, that's sort of one of the elements that I think is really enjoyable in this film. So one of the parts that I really like about this movie is after Joe breaks up with Patricia because he realizes that she's insufferable. Really though, like that's mostly why. He moves on to his boat, and then his dad has broken up with his latest fiance or something. He moves on to his like bigger boat. It's like in the same arena, and they end up like hanging out, and they're talking about relationships, like whatever. And then the father says something like,
I just have to meet someone new, that's all. That's the easy part.
Oh, right, yeah. A snap to find the one single person in the world who fills your heart with joy.
Well, don't be ridiculous. Have I ever been with anybody who fit that description? Have you?
and it's just like, this man has a plan. This man has a plan. He's figured out that he loves her, but that he like is very, very interested in Kathleen Kelly, both online and real life, and that just because she hates him and because he put her out of business doesn't mean that he can't try. He can't try. And I love that. It's so, the idea of like, you are what I want and I'm going to put in some serious effort to try to make it happen. It just gets me, guys. It gets me. So I love that. It's just such a sweet notion. It's so romantic. It's the way that I think people should approach relationships. It's like you find people that really click with you and you really feel something for, and you put some effort in, you know? And I think it's like, and again, it goes back to that sort of, it has that parallel Pride and Prejudice where you kind of learn later that like Mr. Darcy at some point realizes that he needs to like up his game, sort of, to win over Elizabeth Bennet. Even though he's incredibly eligible, so he should be able to marry whoever he wants, but like, she's not feeling it. So he has to make himself worthy of her. I just love her. Like, who doesn't want someone to win you over, to make you, not to win you over, like, wear you down, but to, like, earn your love, you know, earn your good, your high esteem kind of thing. So I had to take a little break. It was time to feed the cats, and they were going to become more and more unruly if I didn't. And I had dinner, and it got dark. I thought it'd be better to switch from the natural light to the man-made light. Okay, that's the cat eating what's left in the can of cat food. There's only a few more things that I want to touch on in this video before I kind of wrap things up. I also really like that, as much as I think that the point of You've Got Mail is the love story, I absolutely think that's the point, and I'm fine with that, because I think telling a nice love story is in and of itself a worthy goal, I guess. That being said, the movie touches on other sort of themes, and I found it quite moving in other ways. For example, the character of Kathleen has to shut down her store, and that's a grieving process for her. It's like a death. It's something that's been in her life, like her whole life. Her mother owned it, so it's like losing that childhood, losing her mother, who's already deceased, and how hard that is, even though you get the sense that there are some real benefits to it, but at the same time, it's a huge loss. It's not easy to kind of wrap in a bow. Like, it's not a good thing, but it's not the worst thing, and it's just sort of unfortunate, but it's part of life. Things end, even great things end. That's really captured really nicely. Another kind of theme that comes up that I think is really interesting is the struggle that Joe goes through, realizing that at some point he sort of says, do you ever feel like you've become the worst version of yourself? And you kind of see his character struggle with like a sort of persona that like comes with like the family that he's part of and the relationship that he's in and the business that he's in, you know, that he's like ruthless and ambitious, and yeah, those are kind of the two, like just kind of a little bit heartless and kind of unsentimental. But then with his like online relationship with Kathleen Kelly, you get sort of evidence that he can be sentimental and hurtful. It's not the opposite of heartless, but full of heart, and that he has kind of drifted from like who he wants to be, and has to kind of pull himself back and make some changes and figure out what he wants because he kind of lost track of it. And I think that's also something that's really relatable and really interesting to explore as part of, like, I feel like the movie captures two people's journey through, say, a year or so where there are big changes happening in their lives, and they're trying to figure out how to improve their lives and how to get to a better place from where they started from. And I like that. I think it's really interesting. I like the time frame. I like that it has a little bit of a longer time frame. I tend to find this a little bit more compelling. There's time to grow and change. So that's another reason why I really like this movie. I've changed positions a little bit. I've talked a lot about the things I love about this movie, and there are many. But there are also things that I would complain about. And so this is the section where I complain about things. I don't exactly want to call it weaknesses because I don't feel like they're strong enough to be weaknesses. I just kind of feel like I always have something to complain about. So this is the section where I complain. Okay, let's get started. So the film is essentially about emotional affairs. And that's really problematic to me. It's very much glossed over that these are emotional affairs. And you get the sense kind of early on, and it grows throughout the movie, that like Joe and Kathleen are not in satisfactory relationships. But that doesn't excuse it. Like, they're having emotional affairs because they obviously think of the person that they're talking to romantically, and they are, like I said at the beginning, they're like sneaking. So they're keeping this from their significant others. And Joe lives with Patricia, and Kathleen doesn't live with Frank, but I think it's one of those things where like he has his own apartment, but they spend a lot of time at her place. Like, he's there most nights. So these are not casual or new relationships. Like, they're fairly serious. So like, it's actually like not really an okay thing to do. And the way that at least like Kathleen's friends like talk about it and joke about it, they kind of celebrate it, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if maybe like back in 1998 it was so new that we hadn't really put labels on this type of thing. It was just like a new thing, and it was like a loophole kind of, but it's kind of not cool, especially because like they're both still in relationships when they intend to meet, and they're so excited to meet. And it's just like, so what? You're gonna meet this person that you're having an emotional affair with, be like, yes, you're great, and then just like kick the other person to the curb, it's a problem to me. It's like the charm of the movie, of all the characters in the movie and the situations and the writing, just gloss over the fact that like this is a shitty thing to do. It's a shitty thing to do. If you're so unhappy in a relationship that you begin an emotional affair, you should probably just walk away from the relationship like around that time. But I get it. You like need to set up the structure, and it's sort of a loophole. And don't ruin things, Julia. Don't ruin things. Maybe I should call this channel Julia Ruins Things. Whatever. I don't know. I do really enjoy Adam Ruins Everything. So we could take off of that. Julia Ruins Fiction. New channel. Okay. No. Not ruining everything. Just taking the time to point out that like that's not cool. And in real life, you probably shouldn't do that, even though maybe you'll have a very happy ending like these people did. So maybe you should. I don't know. Last thing I'm going to complain about is the ending of this movie. And this is, I think, the most sort of like controversial. It's hardly controversial because I still love the movie, but like I'd be curious to see what other people thought, because I love the storyline. I love the fact that at one point Kathleen is like becoming friends with Joe, but also talking to him on the internet and not knowing that it's him, and is sort of like torn between two men who are actually the same person. I think that's really like sort of a fun dynamic to play with. But then at the end, when she goes to meet him, like she goes to meet the like internet stranger, right? And Joe kind of tells her how he feels about her, and she's like, I can't. And then like literally like 2 hours later, she meets her anonymous internet person in the park, and it's Joe. She seems confused for like a second, and then is just like happy, and then says, I wanted it to be you so badly. And that line has never rung true to me because it doesn't make sense to me. Like, I'm probably picking at straws. It just feels like it's like the final moment, like the moment when the like couple gets together, and it's so good. But like, it doesn't make sense. Like, what do you mean you were hoping, like, you wanted to be him? Does that really seem feasible? Like, what am I trying to say? Possible? Does that even seem possible? Like, and the thing is, like, if it is him, and you've been, like, she's been talking to Joe about, online guy, so this whole time he's been pretending to, like, have opinions on this person who's him, and to be kind of, like, undermining this person who's him, and, like, being duplicitous, I think. And I get what he's doing. I get it. He's trying to win her over, like, in real life, so that when she finds out that he's the person online, and she's not just like, oh, well, screw that. She's like, okay, great, we can make this work. So I get it, but I feel like he pushes the line a little bit, or like a lot. Like he could just like not really encourage talking about the online guy and just kind of stick to other things. But they talk about it a lot, and he makes all these jokes, and like if I were her, I just feel like I would have no idea that they were the same person. I would be shocked, and probably like a little bit pissed at first because I had been manipulated a little bit, because like that's what he is, manipulating her by kind of like playing both sides and like saying things about the online guy. It just never made sense to me. I always wanted that scene to be drawn out a bit more, to have a bit more of a conversation about things, because like I would have a lot of, if I were her, I'd have a lot of questions, and I'd probably be like pissed at first. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like kind of a pain in the ass. I don't know. I that's never really made sense to me as a line, or as like the final line of the movie. Anyone who's seen the movie, please let me know in the comments what you think, or what your impression was of that final scene. I'm probably nitpicking. I am definitely known for nitpicking, but at the same time, it doesn't feel so much like nitpicking, because it is like the final line of the movie, and like the kind of one thing that she says upon them finally, like him finally revealing himself. So like, I don't know if it is. It's just never, it's not my favorite part, which bums me out because that should be one of my favorite parts. It's just, it's not. So to wrap up, what have we decided? Nothing really. Love the movie. One of my favorites. Is clearly well regarded as like a pretty good romantic comedy. One of the classics, Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan. I think that it has a lot of the elements that I really like. All in all, I like it, and I think that it has held up in the 20 years since it was made. I do think that at times Joe is a bit manipulative and duplicitous, but everyone is so god darn charming that like, and like emotional affairs, but everyone's so charming. The dialogue's so charming. Birds braid her hair in the morning. He's very sweet. He's a bit of a like Mr. Darcy-esque hero, romantic hero, so it's hard not to love it. So if you have seen it, please let me know what you think. Share your thoughts, your agreements, disagreements, whatever. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend it. It's not on Netflix, at least not Canadian Netflix. See guys, I'm not just doing Netflix. Got you. So, but I'm sure it's like everywhere, you know. And if you have any ideas or requests for movies that you'd like me to talk about, I'd be happy to hear them. And until next time, have a great evening. Bye.